The council chamber was unlike anything Mara Kellen had ever seen. Its walls shimmered with strange energy, glowing in soft hues that shifted like living light. Above the polished floors, alien delegates floated, hovered, or slithered, their forms so different that Mara's mind struggled to comprehend them all at once. Some had wings, some had multiple limbs, and others had faces that seemed to change shape as they spoke. The air was thick with tension, every delegate eyeing the humans with suspicion or thinly veiled contempt. Mara felt the weight of being one of the few humans in a place dominated by species that had never trusted, nor truly respected, her kind. She could feel the hostility in the room, a cold undercurrent that seemed ready to erupt at any moment. But nothing could have prepared her for the moment that would ignite chaos in the council chamber. A sharp, piercing cry broke through the murmurs of the delegates. It was small, frightened, and unmistakably human. Mara's heart leaped as her eyes scanned the chamber, searching for the source. There, near the far end, she saw a human child cornered by a Zorvax officer. The creature towered over the boy, its long, spindly limbs ending in sharp claws. Its segmented armor glimmered in the light, giving it a metallic, almost insect-like appearance. Its face was a horrifying mask, cold and unfeeling, its black eyes fixed on the child with a predatory gleam. The child's small frame trembled, and Mara's chest tightened. Fear surged through her veins, but she forced herself to act. Humans did not turn away when the innocent were in danger. Mara charged forward, shouting a warning that seemed to echo in the vast chamber. "Stay back," she cried, her voice filled with the raw intensity of fear and anger combined. Her boots pounded against the polished floor as she leapt toward the Zorvax officer, intent on throwing herself between it and the child. But before she could reach it, the alien's claw shot out like a striking snake, catching Mara and sending her flying across the chamber. She slammed into a wall, the air forced from her lungs, pain shooting through her ribs. Even as she struggled to rise, she saw the child backed into a corner, eyes wide with terror, body shaking uncontrollably. Mara's mind raced, her instincts screaming at her to protect the child at any cost. The council remained eerily still. Alien delegates whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others merely observing with detached curiosity. None moved to stop the officer. Mara realized then that relying on the council's so-called security would be useless. She was on her own. Her gaze returned to the child and the towering Zorvax, and fury replaced fear. Humans never gave up. Humans never allowed cruelty to succeed when they could act. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, movement caught her eye. Two figures emerged, immense and terrifying in their presence. The Deathworlders, humans bred for survival on planets where the environment itself could kill the unprepared, stepped forward. Their muscles were massive, corded with strength, and their eyes burned with a deep, unyielding fury. These were humans who had faced nature in its most extreme forms, who had survived beasts and storms that would have killed ordinary men and women. Mara felt a surge of hope. With them, the balance of power shifted, and the Zorvax officer was no longer untouchable. The taller Deathworlder stepped forward, his voice a growl that seemed to reverberate through the chamber. "You touch a child," he said, each word deliberate and heavy. "You answer to us." The Zorvax officer's eyes narrowed, but before it could react, the Deathworlders moved. Their speed was almost supernatural, their strikes precise and brutal. In moments, the alien officer was overpowered, tossed to the floor, and pinned. The council delegates gasped, some in horror, others in disbelief. Mara watched as one of the Deathworlders knelt, grasped the alien's head, and placed it on the polished floor before the council. The gesture was violent, shocking, and absolute in its statement. Humanity would not be trifled with. The chamber was silent for a long moment. the kind of silence that fills every corner of a room after something unprecedented has occurred. Delegates stared, unable to comprehend fully what had just happened. Whispers began, first tentative, then louder, as the shock of the act spread through the room. Mara's chest heaved with exertion and adrenaline, but her attention was on the child, now trembling but safe. She moved to the boy, crouching beside him and wrapping her arms protectively around his small body. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe now." The child clung to her, and for a fleeting moment, Mara allowed herself to feel a flicker of relief amidst the chaos. Even as she comforted the child, Mara could sense the undercurrent of change rippling through the chamber. The Deathworlders' actions had sent a clear and undeniable message to every species present. Humans were not to be underestimated. They were not fragile, submissive, or naive. They were cunning, resilient, and capable of overwhelming force when pushed too far. The story of this incident would travel across the galaxy, a stark warning to anyone who thought to harm the innocent or underestimate humanity. Mara stood slowly, guiding the child to her side. She looked around the chamber, her eyes meeting those of the council members. There was shock, yes, but there was also a grudging respect forming in the eyes of some, an acknowledgement that humans had a strength that could not be ignored. She realized then that this was only the beginning. The Zorvax officer had been a single symbol of threat, but larger challenges awaited. Yet for now, she allowed herself a small moment of triumph. Humans had stood firm. Humans had acted when others hesitated. And humanity's spirit, unbroken and fierce, had made itself known to the galaxy. The child's eyes looked up at Mara, still wide with fear but now mixed with awe. Mara knelt again, her voice steady and full of conviction. "We fight," she said. "Humans fight. We protect each other. And we will not be weak when the galaxy tries to take what is ours." In that moment, Mara knew the future was uncertain and danger would come in waves. But she also knew one thing with absolute clarity. Humanity would face it head-on. And any who dared to threaten her people would learn the cost of underestimating humans. The council chamber, once a place of uneasy diplomacy, had become a stage where humanity had declared its presence loud, unyielding, and unstoppable. The news of the council chamber incident traveled faster than any starship could fly. The story of the Zorvax officers striking a human child and the Deathworlders delivering swift justice spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Zorvax Empire, proud and ruthless, could not tolerate such humiliation. Their leaders seethed with anger, and declarations of war rippled through their fleets. Mara Kellen, now a seasoned officer in the Human Defense Coalition, knew that the retaliation would be swift and merciless. Reports came in almost immediately. Fleets of sleek, black Zorvax warships had already begun jumping through hyperspace toward human-controlled systems. The human colonies were scattered, many weakly defended, and the odds of survival seemed impossible. Yet Mara felt no fear in her bones, only the burning determination that had defined her people for millennia. Humans survived because they refused to surrender, refused to give in to overwhelming odds. She gathered her team aboard the Iron Resolve, a battle cruiser bristling with weaponry, shields, and advanced technology. Each crew member aware that their mission could mean the difference between life and death for billions. The target was Leora 7, a mining colony critical to the human supply chain. If it fell, the colony would be enslaved, stripped of resources, and its people killed. Mara stared at the display screens aboard the Iron Resolve, watching as the Zorvax dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace like shadows in the void, their numbers overwhelming. The fleet's sleek black hulls reflected the dim starlight, each ship bristling with weapons designed to annihilate anything in its path. Mara's crew worked quickly, launching small fighter squadrons to intercept and disrupt the enemy advance. Her heart pounded as she issued commands, her mind racing to anticipate the enemy's strategies. Every maneuver counted. Every decision could be the difference between survival and destruction. The battle erupted with a sudden, violent intensity. The void of space became a storm of fire and metal as human fighters engaged Zorvak's vessels. Lasers cut through the darkness, missile trails streaked across the black canvas, and massive explosions illuminated the battlefield in bursts of red and orange. Mara guided her strike team through the chaos, weaving the iron resolve between incoming torpedoes and enemy fire. The ship shook violently with each impact, and alarms blared as shields absorbed the worst of the damage. Her crew responded with extraordinary skill, adjusting firing angles, rerouting energy to critical systems, and launching counterattacks with precision that no alien could anticipate. Despite being outnumbered, the humans' ingenuity and adaptability kept them alive and gave them hope. Amid the chaos, Mara's attention was drawn to the civilian sectors of Leora 7. Reports indicated that children and non-combatants were trapped in damaged domes, vulnerable to the enemy's relentless assault. Her stomach tightened, and without hesitation, she made a decision. "Prepare a rescue squad," she ordered, her voice firm. "We are not abandoning them." Fighters peeled off from the main engagement, maneuvering through debris and explosions to reach the colony's surface. Mara herself donned an exosuit and joined the rescue team, descending to the domes with a combination of skill and desperation. The sight that greeted her was devastating. Broken structures, fires burning in multiple domes, and terrified children huddled together. Unsure if anyone could save them, the first child she reached was barely 10, trembling uncontrollably. "It's okay," Mara whispered, scooping the boy into her arms. "You're safe now." The child clung to her, fear slowly giving way to relief. Around her, the rescue team worked tirelessly, evacuating others as Mara directed them to temporary shelters. Yet outside, the battle raged on with unrelenting fury. The Zorvak's dreadnoughts pressed their advantage, attempting to break through human lines and reach the colony. Mara realized that rescue alone would not save the people. They needed to fight back. She returned to the iron resolve, her mind sharp with determination. The fleet's tactics were aggressive but predictable. They relied on superior numbers, advanced targeting systems, and overwhelming firepower. Humans could not match them in brute force, but they could outthink them. Mara's team executed daring maneuvers, using asteroid fields to ambush enemy squadrons and feinting retreats to lure Zorvak ships into crossfire. Each move showcased the core of human strength: creativity, adaptability, and courage in the face of impossible odds. The battle became a deadly dance, fighters weaving through explosions, shields absorbing blasts that would have destroyed lesser vessels, and human pilots executing maneuvers no alien could anticipate. Despite the chaos, moments of humanity shone through. Mara saw her crew risking themselves to save others, fighter pilots diving into swarms of enemy drones to protect their comrades, and engineers repairing critical systems under fire. She thought of the Deathworlders who had defended the child at the council, and a grim smile crossed her face. Humanity was not just a species. It was a force of will driven by loyalty, love, and a refusal to surrender. As the battle raged, Mara's resolve hardened. She would not allow these aliens to harm the innocent. She would not allow the sacrifice of her people to be in vain. Hours passed like minutes. The battle stretching across the orbit of Leora 7, the Zorvak's fleet, confident in their superiority, began to falter. Human strategies, small but precise, inflicted devastating damage. Fighter squadrons disabled enemy engines, railgun strikes tore through hulls, and the Iron Resolve herself acted as a juggernaut, her weapons cutting swaths through the enemy line. Mara's leadership was relentless, her mind constantly calculating, predicting, and adjusting. Every decision, every maneuver, showcased the essence of human ingenuity. She pushed herself and her crew to their limits, knowing that failure was not an option. In the midst of the chaos, Mara spotted another group of children trapped in a partially collapsed dome. She did not hesitate. Activating the emergency thrusters on her exosuit, she leapt across the rubble, narrowly avoiding falling debris and energy bursts from nearby skirmishes. She reached them just as the structure began to give way, scooping them into her arms and guiding them toward safety. The children looked up at her with wide eyes, fear etched into their faces, but also a growing sense of hope. Mara whispered, "We fight, we survive, and we protect each other. You will see the end of this." Her voice, calm amidst the storm, instilled courage not only in the children but in herself. By the end of the battle, the Zorvax fleet had retreated, leaving the orbit of Leora 7 littered with wreckage. Human losses were heavy, but the colony was saved. Mara surveyed the damage, her chest heaving with exhaustion, her heart filled with pride. The children were safe, civilians accounted for, and the fleet had held its ground against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. She knew this was only the beginning. Wars were rarely won in a single engagement, but humanity had proven something undeniable. Even when outnumbered, even when facing a technologically superior enemy, humans could survive, fight back, and protect what mattered most. In the aftermath, as the survivors tended to the wounded and repaired what they could, Mara stood aboard the bridge of the Iron Resolve and looked out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and unknown enemies, but humanity had made a statement. They were not weak. They were not passive. They would defend their own with ingenuity, courage, and relentless determination. Mara felt a spark of pride and hope ignite within her. The battle for Leora 7 had tested them, pushed them to the edge, but it had also shown the galaxy what humans were capable of. They could be outnumbered, outgunned, but they would never be outwitted when fighting for survival. And Mara knew that the next challenge, whatever it might be, would be met with the same spirit that had carried her and her people through the fire of battle. The Zorvax Empire had not forgotten their humiliation, and now their fury burned brighter than ever. After the crushing failure at Leora 7, they consolidated their forces and set their sights on the Human Council Station, a central hub for coordination and strategy, and a symbol of human resilience. Mara Kellen, battle-hardened and alert, knew that this attack would be the fiercest yet. The Human Defense Coalition had prepared, but even with all their defenses, the odds remained daunting. Hundreds of Zorvax warships, sleek and black, emerged from hyperspace, filling the void with a menacing presence that made even veteran soldiers pause. The human fleet, smaller and outnumbered, gathered near the council station, readying their ships and weaponry, every crew member aware that this battle could determine the future of humanity itself. Mara's heart pounded as she stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, watching the enemy assemble like a dark wave ready to crash down. She knew they could not meet the Zorvax head-on. Brute force alone would not win this fight. Strategy, cunning, and courage would be their weapons. Mara and her officers devised a daring plan, one that relied on deception and the element of surprise. The fleet would lead the Zorvax into a dense nebula, a swirling mass of gas and particles that would blind sensors, distort communications, and create unpredictable gravitational anomalies. The nebula would be their battlefield, a place where human ingenuity could shine and where the Zorvax's superior numbers would be less of an advantage. Mara briefed her crew with calm authority, outlining every maneuver, every contingency. Each pilot, engineer, and soldier knew their role. The success of this plan depended on precision, timing, and courage. There could be no hesitation. As the fleet moved into position, the nebula loomed ahead like a wall of clouds, dark and mysterious, hiding the dangers both natural and created. Mara felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration, knowing that the fight ahead would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the fleet entered the nebula, the Zorvax followed, unaware of the trap awaiting them. Mara's team had placed artificial gravity wells, energy mines, and sensor jammers throughout the dense clouds, creating a deadly maze designed to disorient and destroy the enemy. Human fighters darted in and out of the shadows, attacking with precision before disappearing into the swirling mist. Explosions lit the nebula in bursts of fire and energy, illuminating the wreckage of enemy ships as the Zorvax fleet faltered. Mara watched the battle unfold, directing her forces with calm intensity, anticipating the enemy's moves and countering them with ingenuity. Each human ship moved like a piece on a chessboard, calculated and deadly, turning the chaos of the nebula into a weapon against the invading force. Amid the battle, the Deathworlders led the charge in boarding operations, their strength and ferocity unmatched. They struck at the Zorvax vessels with terrifying efficiency, tearing through alien ranks with brutal precision. Mara observed their actions with a mixture of awe and reassurance. They embodied the raw power and courage that had defined humanity in countless battles. Meanwhile, the Iron Resolve unleashed volleys from its railguns, ripping apart enemy ships and cutting lanes through the Zorvax lines. Every explosion, every successful strike reinforced a single truth. Humans fought not just with weapons, but with intelligence, strategy, and unyielding resolve. The Zorvax, despite their numbers and advanced technology, were struggling to adapt to the unpredictable tactics and relentless attacks of the human fleet. Amidst this chaos, Mara faced a personal challenge that tested her courage and skill to the limit. The Zorvax flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons and shielded by layers of advanced technology, broke through the front lines and headed directly for the Council Station. Mara knew that if it reached its target, it would destroy not only the station but countless lives within. Without hesitation, she led a strike team aboard a boarding craft, racing toward the enemy flagship through the nebula's swirling clouds. The approach was perilous. Debris and energy discharges threatened to tear their ship apart, and Zorvax fighters tried to intercept them at every turn. Mara's hands moved with precision, piloting the craft through the maelstrom, and she guided her team with clear, calm instructions. Their mission was simple in words but almost impossible in execution. Infiltrate the flagship. Disable it and neutralize its commander. Inside the Zorvax flagship, Mara encountered the enemy commander, a towering figure whose presence exuded menace and cruelty. The corridors of the ship were a labyrinth of cold metal and pulsing energy, and every corner could hide a deadly strike. Mara moved with quiet confidence, her body trained for combat, her mind sharp and focused. The Zorvax commander confronted her in the heart of the ship, their eyes locking in a battle of will. The alien's voice, like grinding metal, boomed, "You cannot win, human. You are weak, and your species is nothing." Mara stood her ground, raising her plasma rifle, her gaze unwavering. "You are wrong," she said, her voice steady. "We are humans. We fight. And we survive." What followed was a brutal confrontation, a combination of skill, strategy, and raw determination. Mara used every resource, every trick, and every ounce of training to counter the commander's strength and ferocity. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the corridors shook with the force of their combat. The battle reached its climax as Mara exploited the commander's overconfidence. Using a combination of calculated misfires, environmental hazards, and precise attacks, she disabled the ship's core systems. The flagship's engines flared and sputtered, its corridors trembling, and the commander found themselves trapped in a collapsing hull. Mara and her team fought their way back to their craft, carrying the satisfaction of victory in their exhausted bodies. Outside, the remnants of the Zorvax fleet, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. Mara watched from the bridge of the Iron Resolve as the dark wave of enemy ships dissolved into the void, their threat broken, their arrogance shattered in the aftermath. The human fleet regrouped. The Council Station had survived, civilian casualties were minimal, and the galaxy had witnessed something remarkable. A species underestimated by all others had stood against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. Mara stood among her crew, exhaustion heavy on her shoulders, yet pride burning in her heart. The Deathworlders, pilots, engineers, and soldiers who had fought alongside her shared a moment of silent acknowledgement. They had defended not only their people, but the very principle that humans would never yield to oppression or cruelty. Mara thought of the children saved, of the colonies preserved, and of the countless lives whose futures were secured by the courage of those who refused to surrender. Mara turned her gaze outward, to the stars beyond the Council Station. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers yet unknown, but humanity had proven a simple, undeniable truth. They were not weak, they were not passive, and they would fight for what mattered. The children rescued, the colonies defended, and the fleets victorious were symbols of a species that would never be conquered without resistance. Mara knew this victory would resonate far beyond the battlefield, sending a message to allies and enemies alike. Humans were resilient, cunning, and relentless. No matter how dark the threat, no matter how overwhelming the force arrayed against them, humanity would rise, adapt, and triumph as the human fleet repaired. Regrouped and prepared for the future, Mara allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The battles had been intense, the losses had been real, and the sacrifices had been immense. Yet, in every spark of resistance, in every calculated maneuver, and in every act of courage, she saw the essence of what it meant to be human. Strength was not just in weapons or technology. It was in ingenuity, in the courage to act when others faltered, and in the determination to protect the innocent at any cost. Mara knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy would continue to test humanity, but now, they had the proof that they could face the impossible and emerge victorious. The children, the survivors, and the heroes who had fought together in the nebula would remember this day forever. It was not just a battle won. It was a declaration to the galaxy. Humans would not bow, humans would not break, and humans would never stop fighting. Mara Kellen, standing on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, felt the weight of that truth settle in her heart. The stars stretched endlessly before her, full of danger and uncertainty. Yet she knew that no matter what came, humanity would endure. And with that certainty, she prepared for the next challenge, ready to face the galaxy with courage, wit, and unyielding resolve.